The Saints' miserable 2024 season just came to an end. We'll talk about it right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome back inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu. As always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Lawyers. Been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, hurt offshore, Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. The Saints lose the final game in the season, one where they had a 10-point lead, one where you felt like, man, this could be the most optimistic game of the year for them. Young quarterback had a great first half. Defense starts flying around the ball for a little bit. And then the second half was an utter joke. They get outscored 21-3 in the second half. Defense couldn't make any stops. Baker Mayfield ran for 68 rushing yards. That's just fucking absurd. And then the cherry on top of it all, I was ready to talk about Spencer Rattler to start this show, and I will talk about Spencer Rattler in just a minute. Before I get into that, though, I accepted the Saints were going to lose this game. You know, the way they play in the second half, you know, Clint, I don't make any adjustments. Kubiak is one of the worst second half play callers in the league. Spencer missed a lot of throws in the second half, which obviously doesn't bode well when Rattler was so awesome in the first half. To have him just struggle in the second was tough. Defensively, so many mistakes, a lot of silly penalties. You know, I think of Foster Moreau on the sideline getting penalized on what really just kind of nuked a whole drive for them. You know, you block a punch, you have great field position, and then you give it right back. So you make stupid mistakes. And yet, the lasting image that's going to annoy the fuck out of me for the next couple of weeks is the Saints knowing Mike Evans needs, 5-6 yards to get to the record, knowing he needs that to keep the record going, get the 1,000-yard season, whatever, and to let it happen on, honest to God, it's going to sound terrible, what felt like a fucking Make-A-Wish play is so freaking frustrating because this Saints team looked checked out, and that really bothers me. There was a time where shit like this wouldn't fly. And the funny thing is, the Saints last year, this is the second week 18 that they've done this. Saints last year had that bullshit touchdown with Jamal Williams against the Falcons, and they got ripped for it. It was Bush League. It was immature, and they got ripped for that, okay? Now, week 18, the shoe's on the other foot, and you just accepted it because that's what this team is. And I don't want to hear any rah-rah speeches from the interim coach after this game. I don't want to hear any bullshit about Foster Moreau. Foster Moreau lit the team up this week talking about how they got to be accountable and they got to play for that. Well, dude, you had a costly penalty in this game. Where's the accountability on your side? So this team, to me, there's ways to lose, even in a game that doesn't matter because they weren't going anywhere and they've been an abomination the entire season. They still find a way to piss me off. Again, I was fine with losing to the Bucs. I expect them to lose to the Bucs. To let that bullshit 1,000-yard streak continue where he barely gets over 1,000 yards every fucking season because in reality, Mike Evans is a very good receiver, but he's not an all-time great. But now, I mean, this man's going to make the Hall of Fame off of fucking longevity stats. So it is what it is. But let me get into what I wanted to talk about here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, and I want to talk about Spencer Rattler. Great first half, really bad second half. And I think, unfortunately, we're still kind of caught in no man's land because the second half stuff that Spencer Rattler's doing, it just makes no sense. He was awesome in the first half. And honestly, I think that was the most impressive he's looked all year because it was the second time he played against, this Buccaneers team. I wanted to see how he would look. So what would the adjustments be? And honestly, first half was excellent. The second half, though, missed throws to MVS. He has MVS open, but he throws behind him. There's a third down play where he rolls out, and he executed it perfectly in the first half. Second half, throws it behind Cedric Wilson. So things of that nature, there's inaccuracy in the second half. Is it pressing? I don't know. Is it bad mechanics? Part of it definitely is. But I think for New Orleans, you got to figure out that part. Are you worried about that? If you're not really that worried about Spencer Rattler's second half woes, and you believe that with Olave in the fold, with Shaheed, with Alvin next year, with adding more pieces, that those second half woes will go away, then honestly, just from a money standpoint, I think it would make sense to start him next season. You know, give it to him, give him a longer leash, and see how it goes, because in reality, he's either going to swim and prove that he can be a starting quarterback, or he's going to sink and you'll be able to draft your future starting quarterback, as opposed to Derek Carr, who if Derek's the starter next year, the Saints are probably going to win more games than fans want them to. They're not going to win enough to be good, and they're not going to lose enough to be god-awful. They're going to be probably right where they are this year or where they were last year, although not 9 wins last year was a product of a horrible schedule. So I think for the Saints, logistically, it probably makes sense to start Spencer Rattler next year and see what he can do with more talent around him, with a bigger sample size, not going to worry about his job, knowing that it's his for the whole season. And you'll see, kind of similar to what Washington did with Sam Howell. You gave Sam Howell the full leash, and you were hoping he could be the guy. And if he wasn't, you'd figure it out. And he wasn't the guy, and they just got the guy in Jaden Daniels. So I think that, to me, is the route the Saints should go with Rattler. But there are second-half concerns, and the good thing is they can be fixed because everything that he's fucking up in the second half, he's excelling at in the first half. So I think figuring out that's going to be important. But again, it is frustrating that it was rinse and repeat with this situation, right? Rattler, really awesome first half against the Raiders, bad second half. Really great first half against the Bucs, bad second half. So we'll see what happens with Saints. They're going to have a decision to make at quarterback anyway, but it was interesting to see the same thing unfold for New Orleans. Now, the only positive of today, other than the first half for Rattler, because obviously that was good for the Saints to see the young quarterback shine the way he did, is their draft position. The Saints are going to move up one spot. They'll be picking 9th because the Bears won their game, which is good for the Saints because at this point, you'll take anything you get. And it is kind of frustrating that in this year, picking, being 5-12 gets you 9th. That doesn't seem good enough in my opinion. So that part is definitely frustrating. But hey, 9th is better than 10th. Saints might be able to get themselves a blue chip prospect. Who knows? A guy from Penn State like an Abdul Carter, who I think is a really, really good player, and I think the Saints need defensive help in many, many ways. Maybe that guy's available at 9th, and he wouldn't have been available at 10th. Who the fuck knows? So Saints draft pick improves. That's good news for this team, and we'll see. But I'm definitely at least pleased about that. That said, I'm going to keep saying the same thing I've been saying all season long. I'm more concerned about who's making the pick as to where the Saints are picking. Because you could have the number 1 pick. If your GM doesn't know what they're doing, you're screwed. And unfortunately for the Saints, they've had a lot of draft picks that have whiffed over the last couple of years. And I'll just think to last year where you took Isaiah Foskey in the 2nd round, and that is a literal bust. And you took Kendra Miller in the 3rd round, and he can't stay healthy. So that, at this point, is going to be a bust. So the Saints have had whiffs, and I'd hope that they figure out this offseason where you get new voices in. You guys know where I stand. I think they need a new coach, new quarterback, new GM. But I think the Saints are only going to change at least one of those, which is a coach. I don't know if they're going to make a change of quarterback, and I don't anticipate them making a change of GM, even though I believe they should. But at least a draft pick does improve. It's a very, 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 very small win in what has been a god-awful, frustrating season for the Saints. So what are my offseason hopes? We'll talk about that in just a second. Before I do that, I want to get a quick word from Scott Fickner.
And Jonathan Williams brings it all the way back from the 20-yard line.
What a terrific way to end the first half.
And tonight's game is brought to you by Scott Fickner Injury Attorneys. They always fight for the win.
You mean attorney? It's one lawyer. Scott Fickner?
No, there's 2.
Brad Scott and David Fickner.
Well, it's confusing.
That it is. They could have picked a better name.
Scott Fickner, Injury Attorneys, we fight for the win.
Once again, thank you, Scott Fickner, for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it. Going to keep it rolling here on the Straight Up Saints podcast. Going to talk about my offseason hopes briefly before I turn it over to you guys. So if you have any comments, any thoughts, get them in the chat, any predictions, and I'll pull them up when we get to our fan Q&A in about, let's say, 3-4 minutes from now. So make sure you guys get them in. And as always, if you're enjoying the content that we have here at Boot Crew Media, make sure to leave us a like. It's crazy how fast the season flies. In this case, I guess that's a good thing, right? This was a miserable season for us Saints fans, but it just felt like September. Saints are 2-0. You're doing post-game live streams. You're having a fucking ball. And then now it's like week 18 and you're kind of glad this is over because, man, it's been miserable the last couple of months of the season. So what are my offseason hopes? My first hope, which I don't believe is going to happen, is I'd like to see the Saints do one of those BS promotions to Mickey Loomis where he gets to stay with the organization, but he takes more of a presidential role and you don't have him as the GM because it's hard to really trust moves that he makes at this point. It's hard to trust a guy that hired Dennis Allen. It's hard to trust a guy that hasn't talked to the media since firing Dennis Allen because it wasn't his decision. He didn't agree with it in the first place. So I don't want to say trust issues because I don't know the guy personally, but it's hard to trust him. So my first offseason hope is the Saints find a way to get a new GM in the building. I don't think that's going to happen, though. So let's move on from that one because that just seems too ambitious. The real hope for me is that the Saints do a thorough search and the coach that they bring in is going to give this organization a much-needed facelift. Because I think that's what matters, right? People will ask me, well, who's your candidate? Who's the guy that you like? And I like Aaron Glenn as a candidate. I like Mike Vrabel as a candidate. Obviously, I like Ben Johnson as a candidate, although I don't think he would come to the Saints at all. That he seems like he's going to be very picky. Why would he pick the Saints? Wouldn't make any sense to me. But there's a lot of candidates you can convince me of. But the reality is what they need to have is the ability to come in and just flip this franchise up on its head because that's what it needs right now. This franchise needs a slap in the face so fucking hard that they realize, man, shit's got to change. Because the last couple of years, the Saints haven't been god-awful enough to completely blow up the whole staff and blow up the roster, and they can't because of their financial situation anyway. And on top of it, they've been frustrating enough to make all of us miserable. And I think they need a leader that's going to come in and understand, look, we're not going to be a playoff team next year. There's too many holes on the roster and not enough money to fix it all. But you can start to see a sign of a team on the rise. You could see a vision. The Saints haven't had a vision or any type of identity the last couple of years, right? With Dennis Allen, they were a good defensive team, but they never made the stops that mattered. So how great defensively are you? And offensively, what does this team do that really excites you? Great first half, great opening drive. Cool. After that, Clint Kubiak forgets how to coach. So there's not much to be excited about there. And outside of that, what do we have? We had, before that, Pete Carmichael the year before. Not exactly excited about that. So I think for New Orleans, getting someone that's going to come in and completely change the mood in the locker room and be a leader is so important. We've seen with organizations over the years, guys come in and they immediately set the tone. When DeMeco Ryans went to the Texans, that was not a desirable job. It is now a desirable place. Granted, they've been a little disappointing at times this season because coach, quarterback works out perfectly. You fix things. So would love to see them get the right coach who's a leader above all else. You could tell me X and O's, and I know X's and O's matter, but Kubiak's supposed to be an X's and O's guy, and all he does is piss me the fuck off. So get a good leader that is going to establish a different culture. I don't want to see the Sean Payton culture anymore. It's long gone. He's not here to coach you anyway. So that's my hope. My other hope for this team is to move on from guys that are aging and it won't really mess you up cap-wise to move on from them, right? Like Jamal Williams has to go. He's not serving any purpose. If the Saints can, and I don't know if they will, if they can get out of one of DeMario Davis or Tyrann Mathieu, I think that's going to greatly help. I don't think either one of those guys really plays up to a level that's good enough anymore. I think this team also needs to get themselves a run-stuffing defensive tackle. Now, that might be through the draft, but they need to have some tone-setting guys in the middle of the defense because you know Brzee is going to be your pass-rushing defensive tackle. You need to have someone that's going to stuff the run. So I hope that's the case. Another thing I'd like this team to do, get more offensive help. I love Olave. I love Shaheed, but they go down, and what's your alternative, right? Don't really have much to get excited about. So I think for the Saints, being able to add more talent is so important. And the last thing that I'll say for this team, figure out who is coaching this offensive line and who is coaching this defensive line, because you can't keep investing assets and not getting anything out of it. So either you are drafting the absolute stinkiest of prospects in the world, the shittiest guys in the world that you can't fix, or you don't have the right coaches to fix it. And that's what I want to figure out, because the Saints, again, are probably going to be in a position to draft a defensive lineman or maybe draft an offensive lineman. And my question for them is, when is enough enough? You have invested so many assets in the defensive line, so many assets in the offensive line, and you are not able to dominate teams in the trenches. If anything, it's the reverse. You're getting dominated in the trenches. So I'd love for the Saints to figure that problem out. And this isn't at the top of my hopes, because I think we're a year, maybe 2 years away from the Saints doing this, but make a decision on quarterback in terms of who the fuck is starting next year. Because if it's not Derek Carr, got to cut him. And if it's not Rattler, okay, then what the fuck do you do? Are you going one more year with Carr? Like, just figure that problem out. I'm not expecting the Saints to get their franchise guy in this offseason. This isn't even the draft that people are going to get excited about anyway. So let's see what happens there, but make a decision and make one fairly early. I would like to see them be, have a little conviction there. And don't tell your coach that they need to work with this guy. I think that would be an utter disaster if you're telling candidates, well, I need you to work with Carr or I need you to work with Rattler. That's not how you should operate. They should have their own vision coming in. But it all starts with getting the right coach and going from there. I would love for them to just kind of overhaul this front office and get rid of guys. I don't expect them to do that. So we'll see what happens, but we'll have so much time to talk about this. Obviously, the next couple of weeks, we'll have listen to the Saints interviewing guys. We'll see what they do, obviously. But 5-12, inexcusable. And I'm not saying they have to be a championship caliber team. They're obviously so far off from that. But the Saints are stuck in no man's land. Not bad enough to figure this thing out and get that franchise-changing guy. And obviously, you're not good enough. We've seen that time and time again. You can't even win the worst division in football for the last 3 years. So we'll see what happens. But I'm going to get into our fan Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. We're going to start off with some super chats that you guys have dropped in. Going with Blair here. Thank you for the support, Blair. He says, first, thank you for the coverage this season. They can't keep Kubiak as OC. Rattler's got to figure out the second half. Thank God the season is over. Yeah, I don't want Kubiak back. I don't know if everyone saw it, but there's a report from Tony Pauline, and it was about how Mickey Loomis has a list of certain coaches that he'd like to keep. And maybe that's true, or maybe the report's inaccurate. Who the hell knows? I guess only time will tell. But if Kubiak's one of those guys that he wants to pick and keep because of the first 2 games of the season, that's crazy to me. Because if, as an offensive play caller, you're only good when the running game is going and you could build everything off play action, then to me, that's not that impressive. I think what's impressive is when you lose your spare parts and you got to figure stuff out, Like, I know they have a shit ton of talent, so I don't know if this is the best example in the world. But, the Lions lose David Montgomery, and they're still dropping 40 points. Like, it doesn't really matter for them. So I think for Kubiak, he started off so hot, but how many more weeks did you need to see of second half woes to really get an idea of this is just not the right guy for the Saints? As for Rattler, I agree. I don't know what fixes it. Maybe it's got to be a mental thing because they're easy throws that he's missing. It's MVS on a slant. It's a free play to MVS that he's missing. One where he's rolling out. If he just sets his feet and throws to Cedric Wilson and leads him, he has him instead. He throws behind him. So I think they're fixable, but obviously it's not what you want to see. Got a super chat from Half-Life. Thank you for the support. Says Clint is, I guess, is inconsistent, I guess, or consistent, you're saying. Consistent with being inconsistent, I guess. I don't know if he's ever called a good second half this whole season when it matters most. I don't remember Pete being that bad in the second half. Pete actually used to be good in the second half because he was god-awful in the first half, but it wouldn't matter. Like, the results are still the same. The Saints are not good. Their OCs have not been good, and that's kind of where they're at. Now, I agree with you. He has been brutal this second half. I think in so many games this year, I think of today's game. I think of the Rams game. I think of the Giants game. I'll think of the Raiders game. Think what other ones that they've had. Second half against the Panthers. They've had some brutal second halves. Second half against the Buccaneers the first time they met. So you can't just tell me it's all on the quarterback. It's got to be on the play caller too. And obviously for Clint, it just seems like if he can't enforce his will with the run game, then he doesn't know what he wants to do. And that's a really frustrating spot. Cliff for the super chat. Thank you for the support. Cliff says, who dat, Chris? Thanks for sticking with this mess all season. Good first half of football for the Saints. Unfortunately, the second half was more of the same. Yep. More of the same, man. First half was electric. I was pretty excited. I was like, ooh, we might have some fun dialogue here about Spencer Rattler. And we still could. I think Spencer does some exciting stuff. But, to see him struggle in the second half as much as he did, very, very frustrating. So I think, for this team, like I said, they need a facelift this offseason. Everything needs to change. And you just got to hope that they do. But thank you for the support, Cliff. I really do greatly appreciate it. Jonathan with a super chat says, congrats, Bucks. You get your pity 1,000-yard season. Enjoy getting ass blasted by a real team next week. First off, thank you for the support, Jonathan. Second, I agree. I said it during the halftime show, right? Because some people are like, hey, Chris, why do you want to win this game? If the Saints win, then the Falcons can make the playoffs. I don't really care which one made the playoffs. I think they're both going to get their freaking ass beat against the loser of tonight's game between the Lions and the Vikings, right? Like, because that's the 5 seed. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm being stupid for feeling that way, but I don't think the Bucks are going to beat the Lions or the Vikings. I don't think the Falcons would beat either one, So, maybe that's naive of me. But, yeah, and as for the 1,000-yard record, like, whatever, man. If you're the Saints, why don't you double his ass? You doubled him in the red zone like a drive before. But when they need to go get it, you just let him get it. And again, if Mike got it and the Saints double teamed him, you can't say shit about it because, that's earning it, right? And I respect the hell out of that. but the way it happened was just so lame. But you know what? The Saints kind of deserve it because last year they did some lame shit against the Falcons. So I guess what goes around comes around. Derek with a super chat says, this game shows we need an offensive head coach, in parentheses, Ben Johnson. Derek, thank you for the support. Yeah, ideally, I'd love to see Ben Johnson as the coach of the Saints. If you're Ben Johnson, why would you go to New Orleans, right? Do they have their franchise quarterback? No. Do they have a top 5 pick? No. Do they have a lot of money to spend? No. Have they been hitting on their draft picks lately? No. Do they have a lot of offensive talent? No. So they don't check off a lot of boxes. I think the team that checks off a lot of boxes for him, actually, the Chicago Bears. The problem is the Bears have been dysfunctional for decades now, and maybe the NFL doesn't want to admit it because they're one of their storied franchises, but they've been pretty shitty for a while. My existence, all I know is one Super Bowl appearance for the Bears, okay? Like the Rex Grossman Bears, and that's it. That's all I know. So, like, I think for Ben, he's going to be so selective. Why would he pick the Saints? But I do agree, like, having an offensive head coach is clearly the way to go in this league, right? Just think of the top coaches. You know, Dan Campbell, offensive coach, even if you don't want to consider him, fine. Andy Reid, offensive coach. Sean Payton, offensive coach. Sean McVay, offensive coach. Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell. So a lot of the top guys, offensive coach. So I agree with you, but I don't think they're going to go with an offensive coach, and B, I just don't think Ben Johnson will come here. I'd love to see him on the Saints, but I just don't see it. Jacob says, I don't think the Saints offense knows they can show up in the second half. Also, easily the worst game by the defensive line of the season for sure. And I would also argue that Joe Woods proved again he's a shitty defensive coordinator, because how many times did we have to watch Baker Mayfield scramble and pick up 15, 20 yards and then taunt the defense? And look, no knock on Baker. He just had a career year. So this isn't the day for me to knock on Baker. But if you're going to let Baker Mayfield run around, kind of punk your ass around the field, that's just crazy to me. That's crazy. But this defensive line, as I mentioned before, they need help. They need a run stuffer. They need an elite defensive end. And how about you start changing up your prototype? The Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport, Isaiah Foskey's of the world have not worked for the Saints. So how about you switch it up? Michael says, I told y'all we were a bad second half team. That's why I wasn't convinced. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't convinced either, to be honest, Michael, but I'm kind of just hoping, like you're hoping a young quarterback figures it out a little bit. I live with the defense. The defense stinks. I had no hopes for the defense. So their second half collapse was like, whatever, right? I didn't really move a muscle, but Spencer Rattler stinking in the second half kind of really, it stings a little bit, right? Because you want to see him play well, but it's just it's tough to see the same thing unfold. AI says, sell the team or move the dome to the east. It's an eyesore in the city, especially after what we experienced. This team is stressful. So is the organization. I don't believe they'll be sold anytime soon, but maybe I'm wrong. Xavier says Clint's inability to make second half adjustments should keep him from ever finding another OC job. I'd like to think so, right? And I know, like, it matters, like your players who you got, do you have enough talent around you to make your system thrive? And I get that, but man, enough is enough for Clint Kubiak. Like, to do the same shit every single week is so frustrating. And it's clearly a problem that he has. And I hope for his sake, he figures it out, right? But he's not figuring it out in New Orleans. D23 says Saints defense continually on 3rd and long, kept going into man coverage and leaving the entire middle of the field open for Baker to run. 3rd and long. I mean, that throw to McMillan that set up the first and goal fiasco, which ended up being 1st and 10, and then to give up a touchdown to him like the very next play. There was a point where the defense on the field for about 20 minutes of real time, but only like 3 minutes of game time. And none of those breaks in between helped out the defensive players or helped out defensive coordinator Joe Woods to be like, yeah, maybe I should change shit up. Margaret says, end to an awful season. 2 selfish penalties killed the momentum. I agree with that. D23 says, frustrating that they couldn't get off the field due to entirely mental errors. Every 2 seconds of the second half, flag. And all of them are warranted, right? You can't really get frustrated. Forgive says, I thought the linebackers and corner played well. This was a defensive line disaster. They need to change the prototype this offseason. They need smaller and faster guys. Yep, I agree with you. You can't keep running the same thing again. It's just not working, man. Saints 9 says, there it is. The Saints have eliminated the Falcons. D23 says, we made the Bucs look much better than they actually are because we never show up in the second half. AI says, our candidates for coach are fucking Gruden and Glenn. This organization is unserious as hell. Look, I'll say this. This isn't a shot at you, AI, by the way. So I hope, I hope my tone doesn't come off weird. It's not directed at you at all. It's your comment is actually accurate. For Gruden, right? Like, there's obviously the concerns with Gruden just from the character concern part. But I just want to point this out because, everyone's like, well, if you overlook that part, okay, let's overlook him being a horrible human being for 1 second, which I don't want to do, but let's just overlook for 1 second, right? He has not gone over 500 since the year 2008. So what is the reason for hiring a guy like that? To me, that's concerning. Aaron Glenn, I would not be as concerned about. I think Aaron Glenn is, a really good leader. I think what he's been able to do with Detroit's defense this year, despite losing talented guys every week to injuries, is really impressive. But Gruden, you will not be able to sell me on. I think Gruden's the type of move you make. Just know you're going to lose people in the organization, right? And especially part of the fan base. I feel like you're going to lose a good bit. Xavier says, if your choices are Aaron Glenn or Rizzi, do you really think it's worth switching? I do. If you think Aaron Glenn could be the coach of the future, then yeah, you make the switch. If you think that it's just making a change for the sake of change or just keeping Rizzi in, then all right, I understand that. But it's where you see it coming from. I do think Glenn can be a good coach. I really do. But you got to be able to give coaches full reign. And I think that's the concern. And Derek with another super chat. Thank you for the support. Derek says, Kool-Aid locked Evans when lined up. I thought Kool-Aid showed a lot of promise today. He competed his ass off. A lot of really big reps for him in the red zone. I thought he won a lot of those. So I don't know. I think Kool-Aid showed a lot towards the end of the season. And I think he's a really smart football player, great instincts. I'd like to think he's only going to get better. To me, I think he is a far superior outside cornerback than Alontae Taylor. I don't know what the hell they're going to do with Alontae, moving forward. But I thought Kool-Aid had a good day for him at the office. So I agree with you for sure. I think that was a nice day for Kool-Aid with the way he played. Forgive says least obvious Kubiak second half disaster. I think least oblivious, or I don't even know. I can't even read right now. I think that should do it for him. Yeah, it should do it for him. I mean, I don't see how the fuck he comes back. It's the same shit every single week. Saints 9 says anyone other than Matt Nagy. Yeah, I don't know how the hell we got to this point where he's on their list, but he is. So there's going to be a lot of interviews that are going to piss people off. I'm not saying I want that. I just know that's what's going to happen, right? They're going to interview him. They'll try to interview Mike McCarthy. They're going to try to interview Gruden. They're going to piss people off. There's no doubt about it. AI says we need to get someone who has no previous ties to the organization during the Sean Payton era. Ideally, yes. Yahtzee says as long as Loomis stays all of this is a moot point. New head coach or QB won't matter with the crap roster and cap he's put us in. I don't disagree. It just feels like that's the biggest problem for them. Offseason 735 says incoming massive rebuild needed. For sure. Yahtzee says dumb penalties can't adjust on either side of the ball, and after halftime, zero playmakers. No playmakers today. I mean, Jawan, I guess, played well. Had, the drop at the end when it mattered most, so that part stinks, but I thought he played well. Plenty of opportunities in the second half, stripped away by dumbass penalties. I mean, I think second half, right? You had the face mask penalty followed up by, that followed up a different penalty. That followed up unnecessary roughness on Tyrann Mathieu, which I don't know how the hell he missed a tackle. Like, how can you miss a tackle and get called for unnecessary roughness? I don't know. To me, that's just odd. But that obviously wasn't ideal. A lot of stupidity for the Saints, Ed says Panthers finished with 5 wins and are right now a better team than the Saints. Yep. Panthers they're ascending. It doesn't mean they're ascending high, right? Like, it doesn't mean they're going to be a good team, but they're ascending where the Saints, I don't know where the fuck they're going. I genuinely don't know where they're going. This is not a good organization right now. Offseason 735 says, Chris, how's your mental health doing after this game? It's going. I mean, look, obviously this is not the type of season that makes you all happy, right? Like this is not the one that eases your mind, gives you a little escape from real world problems. But you know what, man? What's the difference? 5-12. They were 5-11 coming into this. Like, I'm okay. I'm okay with it, So we'll see. You know what? I had to check. I believe, and I'll check later, guys. I think if Vegas wins later, I think the Saints move up one more spot in the draft. I have to check because I think this Let's Go Raiders comment. I'll have to check. It's a good spot though, if right. Half-Fly says the Bears and Panthers win, so is that 8th? I believe the Panthers are still ahead of the Saints because of strength of schedule. Jasper says, I pray for whatever new coach we get doesn't bring in Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I would be shocked if they bring in Aaron Rodgers. I'd be shocked, I'm not going to lie. I'd laugh my ass off, though, because there's no quarterback that I have criticized more in my life than Aaron Rodgers. I feel like it'd be poetic justice would be what I deserve, you know? Yachty says we're going to be the doormat of the division for a long while unless they clean house this offseason. Hope not. I miss a coach that would rather choke on his gum rather than allow a rival to stat pad. Thank you, man. I mean, look, they don't all have to be Sean Payton, but like, how the fuck do you allow the Buccaneers to line Mike Evans up? It is so blatantly going to be something short, something a quick hitter doesn't put them in a high risk situation, and you let it happen. He's like spiking the football on the field. Okay. You would have thought they won the motherfucking Super Bowl and it's week 18. Okay. Like, to me, that's embarrassing. And maybe they've been through a lot this season. It's tough. They're ready to just kind of hit the snooze button. I get it. But to me, that's a frustrating look. And I could live with the Saints losing. They've lost 12 out of their 17 games this year. That doesn't bother me. But giving up, that record, allowing that streak to continue, just nonsense, man. Nonsense. So that kind of bothered me. And obviously you could tell I've been bitching about it all day. John says, here's another really scary thing for the Saints. Baker looks like a franchise guy. Bryce is breaking out. Penix looks like the future of the Saints quarterback is ? No, of course it is. It's absolutely a scary thing. Now I'll argue that the Saints don't have an elite quarterback talent in their division, and I will stand on that. I think Bryce Young looked awesome today. I don't think Bryce Young is going to be a special quarterback, but he looks to be like he could be a good one, and that's scary. Penix, I think, could be a good quarterback, but he's more of like your typical kind of point guard of a quarterback where it's all from the pocket, kind of going to be that field general. You're not going to have that explosive off-script playmaking, which is still a good quarterback. I'm not knocking Penix, right? And then Baker, I think I would have to keep doing it consistently. I'm not saying that he isn't good because Baker just had a career year. The man threw over 40 touchdown passes, right? But I do believe that the NFC South doesn't have an elite quarterback talent in it, but the Saints obviously are at the bottom right now, right? Like, you don't know who is your quarterback for the future, and the other teams at least do, and that is a tough spot to be in. There's no question about it, and I think that's a great point to bring up. Kyle says, thank God this is over. Saints fans that are tankers are happy about this loss now that the Panthers and Bears have won. Yeah, the tanking fans today could be a great day for them depending what happens to the Raiders, although admittedly, I don't know what's going on with that game. I haven't checked, so let me just pull up the score real quick. Raiders up 3-0, so and maybe it'll be a great day for fans who tank. Half-Life says, even when they knew who it was going to, they didn't even touch him. Sums up the season. Kind of sums up the team, to be honest. Mike says, thank you, Nathan Shepard, for saving our draft pick. That's fair. D23 says, if the team had any fight in them, they would have purposely tackled Evans the second the ball was snapped. I mean, yeah, do something about it. You don't have to commit a penalty there, right? Like, it doesn't have to be over-the-top nonsense, but maybe try. Obviously, they didn't there, and that's frustrating. So, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Saints kind of allowed that to happen, and it'll be talked about all over SportsCenter this week. You guarantee that. Drew Hoop says, Eric McCoy is the puzzle piece, hopefully. Eric says, did our draft pick improve with Carolina winning? I do not believe so, guys. I believe the Saints had a tougher strength of schedule slightly, but they did, and because of that, they're going to be picking 9th. And the Panthers will be picking 8th. If the Raiders win, though, I believe the Saints move up to the 8th spot, and I think Vegas drops to the number 9 spot. So at least that'd be good for the Saints if that happens. You get a little win there. Whodat712 says, Chris, thoughts on this? 2021 may have been the worst thing to happen to the Saints. A bunch of injuries and grocery baggers at most positions, and they go 9-8, fooling everyone into thinking they can win. I don't know, because, like, I've always said this, right? The Saints were right in thinking the NFC South was for the taking the last 3 years. They were absolutely right. The NFC South's been a joke the last 3 years. But they miscalculated on head coach. They miscalculated on quarterback. They miscalculated on draft picks. And then this is kind of where you're at, right? And I'm not saying that the Saints should have gone for it like they did. I'm just saying the division's been there for the taking. So I don't think it's that they got fooled. I think they just fucked up the whole process, right? You overspent on a quarterback that didn't elevate the team that much. You didn't get the right head coach in, and then you stuck by the head coach. I would have loved to see what happened if they fired Dennis Allen after last year, which is what I asked for, which is what a lot of us thought was going to happen after the Falcons fiasco where the locker room pretty much turned on him. But you told the locker room, hey, you got to stick with this coach. And if you don't want to be here, here's the door. The Saints decided to run it back with Dennis Allen, and you get this nonsense of a year. So I don't know. Like, part of me doesn't think they were wrong for going for it, but they fucked up every single step of the plan. And that's what kind of did them in. Yahtzee says, I can't watch entire season Rattler unless we're just tanking. Then it's whatever, but he's not the answer. But see, that's why I actually think you should be starting Rattler. Either he figures it out and you're thrilled, or he doesn't and you're picking a quarterback in the top 5. Like, I'm not saying you're going to get Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels, those guys do not come out every single year. They just don't. But the Commanders gave Sam Howell kind of free reign to be the starter, hoping it would work, and it didn't work. And then they got Jaden Daniels. So sometimes it pays to go that route. And I know it will be frustrating, and we'll probably see some really bad football next year. But we just saw really bad football this year, and we saw really bad football the year before. So one more year of bad football, in my opinion, will not bother me. At least to me, it won't do a lot. T. Scott says, guess Saints will be HBO Hard Knocks. They won't be entertaining, I'll tell you that much. Kyle says, I'd better expect both coaching staff to be gone, though part of me wants to give a chance and a short leash on Kubiak and his staff, but a clean slate needs to happen when we hire a new head coach. Yeah, I wouldn't bring anyone back. I would just completely overhaul the whole thing. Saints 9 says we roll with Rattler. They need an offensive minded head coach, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think you are. How do I word this the right way? I don't think you are hiring head coach like, hey, who's going to fix Rattler? Because like you draft him in the 5th round. Like you don't have a lot invested in him. Like I don't want to say he's worthless to the organization, but draft capital wise, that's how they view 5th round picks, right? You don't think much of them until they prove you otherwise. Now, I would like to see him with an offensive minded coach. I think that's should help, right? But I don't think the Saints are going to make a move based off that. I think you got to pick whoever's going to be the best leader and go from there. And hopefully for them, they can. AI says, I don't know why y'all hype up our draft pick. Y'all know we're going to pick a bust. Most likely, man. And I don't disagree with that at all. But if it's Mickey Loomis picking, good chance. Wesley says, can't the Jets win, get us up to 8? I believe the Jets would not, though, because of strength of schedule. I don't know how much would change, but I think because of strength of schedule, the Jets would still be ahead of the Saints. Maybe it flips after today. I don't know how much the strength of schedule flips if they end up losing, if they end up winning today. They played Denver earlier this year. Denver's record will improve with a win today. So I don't know, maybe enough changes happen, but I'd have to see what the breakdown is. I don't think it will change that much. So I think the Raiders are the team that you're looking at. Jay Hoodie says, I want Genty at 9. We need Burden more, but Genty seems like a Saints pick. I'll say this, right? Because like Genty seems like, you take a running back, it feels like a luxury, right, to go first round. But I think New Orleans just needs playmakers. And, this past draft, we were all thinking, hey, Fuaga or Brock Bowers. And you get Fuaga, and Fuaga's been awesome. Brock Bowers has been fucking electric to watch. And I think for the Saints, they have so many holes right now that getting good football players that to me should be the priority. And if next season's team, the MO and the identity of them is Alvin and Ashton Genty, then let's fucking ride. Because I think actually that's something that you can at least build off of. And to some degree, when shit hits the fan or you're going into a tough game, you got two guys that you can at least lean on. And heck, if you make those your running back tandem, right? That's your running back tandem. You don't think things are going to be easier for Olave and Shaheed? Like, I think it would. So I'm not against them drafting Genty. And I know people don't like going running backs in the first round, and I get it, right? Saints, though, just have to draft playmakers. And I don't even think they'll draft Genty. I think if I had to guess, Abdul Carter seems like a Saints type of pick. So I feel like that'll be the guy. And maybe I'm wrong. But if you can take Genty, take Genty. I think the biggest sin in the NFL is reaching because of position. Like, I think the Titans are picking 1 and the Browns are picking 2. If they don't like Shador or if they don't love Cam Ward, don't draft him. Draft Travis Hunter. Don't overthink it. Take the better football player. I don't understand why teams do this. And maybe it's the rush, it's the pressure and not having enough time to build a roster in your image, because this is such a what have you done for me lately type of league. But if I'm the Saints, and let's say you don't like the edge guys there, and Genty's by far and away the best prospect on the board, who am I to get mad? This team needs football players. Good football players. That's what they need. They got too many bad ones. So I'll take whoever at this point, Rosenfield 10 says, I'm trading down in the first round. We need bodies, and the first round pick is our only real asset. I'm also not against that either. Unfortunately, their GM, that is not what he does. He does not trade down. Cliff says, Chris, can you still be excited about whoever the next head coach is with Loomis still here? I can't. Truthfully, not fully excited. I think if I feel like the Saints are casting a wide search, then yeah, I guess I could be somewhat excited because change is interesting and change doesn't always mean it's good, but shit, when you're doing the same thing, you'll take change. But yeah, I don't think you could be fully excited, to have a coach who hired Dennis Allen, didn't want to fire Dennis Allen when he saw that it wasn't going well. Yeah, I could definitely see why people be discouraged. Walltown Best says, can we talk about how Clint can't make adjustments at halftime? It's been all year long. Yeah, I mean, that's who he is. Great at scripting drives, and that's about it, Saints 9, oh, geez, I can't even speak. Saints 9 says, learn how to tackle on D and get younger at the key positions. Yep, Boston Ballfont says, who do you think we hire as head coach? I think it'll be either Glenn or Vrabel. I believe it's going to be Aaron Glenn, but who knows, man? I think Vrabel's another one. I think Vrabel could have his pick. I think that there's going to be a lot of coaches that feel like, hey, you can go out, if you're, I don't want to say the Jets are dysfunctional, but if you're the Bears and you don't get Ben Johnson, you want a culture guy, I think you can go out there. Maybe you get Vrabel. If you're the Giants and you fire Brian Dable tomorrow, maybe you go get Vrabel. So I don't think the Saints are going to be able to get him, but I'd like to see them bring him in for a meeting. I think that would be ideal. I think they should be bringing in every candidate they could. Lance says Carr's got to take a pay cut. If not, roll with Rattler and speed up the cap, fix it by year. Spend cash on Higgins and Greenlaw, draft Campbell for left guard or tackle. If tackle, kick Fuaga back to right tackle. I'm not trying to be rude. Where are they getting the money to spend on T. Higgins? T. Higgins is going to get a lot of fucking money. So I like the idea of adding T. Higgins, but it's not realistic. There's $60+ million over the cap. Like, they're not adding a $30 million wide receiver, which is what he might become. That's just what he might be at this point. As for Greenlaw, if I'm Greenlaw, if your market's not great, why would you leave, right? I would just stick with the Niners, try to re-up my value, and then go from there. So that's just the way I look at it. Maybe it's going to be different. D23 says it's crazy to look back when we're 2-0 and realize that we'd only win 3 out of the remaining 15 games. Kind of sad, huh? I mean, pretty depressing. Eric says, good thing the NFC South is terrible. Any team can win it if they get a few good players and stay healthy. Tampa Bay can be beat. We played them. Can't speak today. We played with them today with a bunch of backups and old players. I agree. I don't think the NFC South is a ridiculous division. It's ridiculously stupid, yes, but that's about it. What else do we have going on here? Cassio says, if you're a good coach, why the hell would you come to the Saints? It's a great question. I don't have the answer for you. I guess because there's only 32 head coaching jobs. That's the best thing to say, honestly. Boston Ballfont says we need help at pretty much every position on the team other than kicker. Hey, Groupie was money this year, man. Blake Groupie was money. Ends up finishing the year. Let me pull it up real quick. In terms of misses, he finished this year with only 4 misses. Pretty damn good. So, a nice show over him today. 4-4 to end the season. So, shout out to Blake Groupie. At least one positive from this year. Jay Hoodie says, do you take a chance on a decent but unproven quarterback like a Justin Fields or Malik Willis? I mean, probably not. Like, they're going to cost more than going with an unproven guy you already have, right? I don't know. Maybe Fields if he's not expensive, but I kind of think Justin Fields is who he is, right? I think he's a really exciting player at times, but he just doesn't have what you need to be a great quarterback. And who knows? Maybe that'll change. But the market won't be great for those guys anyway. But are they going to spend $5 million on a quarterback? I just don't know if they will. I just don't see it. C735 says, anyone on the coaching staff you retain next year? I'd just blow up the whole coaching staff personally. I don't see what's the point of keeping any of these guys. I just don't. Just start over, let your coach bring in guys. If your coach comes in and wants to keep certain guys, all right, like if that's their call, fuck it. But that's it to me. I don't think you do anything. I don't think you keep any of these guys or force any of these guys on the coaching staff. I think that'd be so stupid. Jay Hoodie says, I love Aaron Glenn here. I could see Nola trading down in the draft just to get extra picks. They do need more depth than a star prospect like Genty. I love him, but now I'm talking myself out. Look, I said before, ideally, yeah, trade back. Get some extra picks. Saints need all the picks they can get in the world, but that's just not what they do. They don't really trade back. They don't like to do it. And I don't know the rationale behind it, but that's just not them. Vincent says, fire Foskey into the sun would not be enough. Fire him in the sun. When he comes back, fire him again. Kyle says if we retain Kubiak, he needs to be on a short leash, has to have better consistency on his play calling. He needs to start making adjustments in the second half, but I think we should move on from him. I agree. There's no point in bringing him back. The Sauce Store says, I think Spencer would be a great backup. Could be. Arm talent, spot starts if you need to. Can play great in spurts. You know, we've seen good first halves, but that's about it. Lance says, DA scheme ruined our draft picks. We picked to fit his scheme. Foskey and let players go that didn't. Bond and others. Yeah, no Bond, no Caden Ellis. The Trey Hendrickson stuff, whatever. Like, they went with Davenport over Hendrickson, and it didn't work. The other two, more so frustrating than anything, you know? Rosenfield 10 says, anyone will be better than what we have at most positions. The trenches are the key. It sucks we draft trenches high all the time, but it doesn't change the fact that we need it. No, it definitely doesn't change the fact. It definitely doesn't change the fact that they need it. I think that's the frustrating part, though. Like, if you keep investing into that position group and you still need to keep investing, something's not working. And either your front office sucks at their job or your coaching staff can't develop. And I think for the Saints, it might be both. Lance says, don't want Graham. Give me the guy next to him at Michigan. Grant, he's a huge run-stopping mountain, which allowed Mason Graham to play free. We got Brzee to do that. Just need a run stuffer next to him. I mean, I would not mind any type of defensive tackle that's going to give them a boost. I think that is a necessary thing for them. Colin Saunders and Nathan Shepard were not good signings for this team. They need to get better at defensive tackle. Cody says they should have put 4 guys covering Evans at the end. I agree with that. Definitely agree with that. I would triple team the motherfucker if I were them. Walltown Best 88 says, what are your thoughts on John Gruden? I would not hire John Gruden at all. I would not hire him at all. I don't think that the NFL has evolved to the point where it's beneficial to him. I think that his last couple of seasons with the Raiders were okay at best, nothing super special. And that is me excluding the fact that there is baggage with John Gruden. Because I know NFL teams overlook baggage. So in their minds, you overlook that fine. I said before, hasn't gone over 500 since 2008. Olsen says, glad we don't have to watch this season anymore. I really don't blame you. Ed said, Tom Brady said they had poor pass rush habits. That Tom Brady was also giving Rattler like F throws every other play in the second half. Cody says the only reason Ben Johnson will consider the Saints is Mickey has done anything and everything to get Sean and DA what they wanted with free agents and coordinators. Yeah, I mean, it's that I would agree on. I do think that is the one edge. But when everything else is just so poor or lackluster, like why would you want to go? The roster's not good. The financial flexibility is not great. They haven't drafted well. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I do agree if there was one reason, though, it would be that. Half-Life says, I see where people are torn on Chase Young. We don't play players to almost make plays. We pay them to make plays. I agree on that wholeheartedly. I think Chase Young, the idea of Chase Young is better than actual Chase Young. And I've said that for the last couple of years now. I was hoping this would be the year, really did well in training camp, looked good in the preseason. Thought maybe. And he's not a bad football player. Like, I want to make that very clear. I don't think Chase Young's a bad football player at all. But I think Chase Young is like always a step or two away from making the big play. And I really, really wish that he would be able to be that guy, but he's just not, What else do we have here? We got Ed saying, I heard Matt Nagy, I will boycott this franchise. Yeah, I mean, look, it's just a name. Doesn't mean they're going to hire him, but that it's just a guy that's been mentioned. Ray Buck Bolt says, Gruden's last season with the Raiders, you mean best offense in NFL? Typical Saints fan. First off, if you're a Bucs fan, what the fuck do you care about who the Saints hire? Second, I said what I said. If the goal of the NFL is to win games, and John Gruden has not gone over 500 since 2008, why should the Saints hire him? And what am I supposed to believe John Gruden's going to do with this roster? Honestly, forget about, I don't give a fuck about all the baggage stuff that comes with it at this point because I've accepted the NFL doesn't care about that. So why should I at this point? If they don't care about who they hire, I don't care. Fine. It is what it is. He is not a winning coach anymore. If you really think that John Gruden's going to change a franchise, why doesn't your fucking team hire him? Honestly, if that's what you want, Then how about the Bucs hire John Gruden then? Please. And for the record, the Raiders still made the playoffs without him because he ended up getting fired. This is a bad fucking roster. What the fuck is John Gruden going to do over here? Bring another old-ass coach? That would be something that would bother me. If the Saints go with an old coach, they got to go young. They got to have a guy that's going to come in and ideally, if it works, ends up fixing their team. JB says, Peyton did Loomis' job so long that he fooled himself in believing he's good. 2021 season and after, downhill. I mean, that's fair enough. Trade or cut Carr this offseason, I'm begging. Maybe. It definitely could. It definitely could be, a situation where you cut him. I don't know who's trading for him, but that's about it. James Bond, definitely not the real James Bond. Bucs are division champs. Mike got his 1K. You're mad about this game. Your season was over 6 weeks ago. The season was over way longer than 6 weeks ago. It's not about that. It's about the fact that the Saints have shown zero pride over the last 2 months. Now, enjoy the division title. Enjoy losing in the first round, and congrats on the 1K yards for Mike Evans. Jarrell says, I like Rattler for the future. I like for him to play more consistent, but he has shown flashes. The inconsistencies are frustrating, but he's a rookie quarterback. I get it. Ed says, what do we do with King of Pressures, Chase Young? Resign. As all things in life, right, comes down to how many dollar bills are in his face, and if it's beneficial to keep him, sure. If he's going to get paid, which I don't expect him to get paid like long term, I don't know. Like he is a capable player, but like he said, king of the near big play. Jay Hoodie says, what year do you think the Saints will be good again? I say 2027 at best. I'm going to stick to 2028. I feel like it can go 2025 god awful. 2026, not good, but maybe you show progress. 2027, you start to get much better. And then 2028, you're a playoff team. I know that sounds ridiculously negative, but that's kind of where I'm at. But 2027 is right there anyway. If you're a year early on it and you draft well, you'll be good. Ed says, Chris, just want to say on behalf of Who Dat Nation, we appreciate all the work you do, giving us a place to vent and talk about our team. Does a lot for us every Sunday. Thank you, good brother. Thank you for that kind word, Ed, and I really do appreciate it. I hope that throughout the season, you guys getting your comments in and all that, you guys have had fun. And if not, I genuinely apologize for that. I know that this season has not been ideal. Saints have been an absolute mess, and it's going to take a while for them to fix this team. There's no doubt. I'll be here through it all, but it's going to take a while. Ronnie says, I'll tell you what Alontae Taylor is, a quality cornerback. He could stand to be more physical, though. Before Lattimore left, Taylor was locking the slot up this year. He was even defensive player of the week of week one. I think he is tremendous in the slot, and I think that's where I don't want to say frustrated, because frustrated is not the right word for Alontae, but I think that's where you should make him a full-time slot corner, in my opinion. The struggles on the outside to me are pretty evident. Doesn't mean he can't get better. I think commit to a spot, though. I understand why you didn't commit to him outside this year, because where are you going to play him, right? Debo and Lattimore were your outside corners, so it didn't really make sense. And you wanted to play your most talented guys, so you played your most talented guys. But I think this offseason, you got to make a decision. He's got to know, right? Like, is he going to spend this offseason working as an offense outside cornerback, or is he going to work in the slot and kind of go from there? So to me, that's what I think is very, very important for the Saints, and we'll see if they do that. Sorry, but letting Evans get those yards should be a fireable offense, coach, player, everyone. I mean, they're just going to let a lot of these guys walk out the door anyway, but I agree. Ronnie says, I like Rizzy. Is there any chance he's still in the locker room next year? I think it's just pretty much either he gets the position full-time or he's not here. I don't see how you work as an interim coach and then stay with the same team. You usually go elsewhere, and I'd imagine that he'll have a chance to go, I don't know what team, but anyone that wants a better special teams coordinator, maybe he's their guy. So I think that if he doesn't get the head coaching job, he's out of here. Half-Life says, I thought I saw something on Browns keeping Watson, so maybe not a quarterback. So Browns structured his contract where I believe starting 2026, they have more financial flexibility, but he is going to be on their roster next year, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the starter. They have talked about either bringing in a young guy or bringing in a vet. Stefanski's still going to be there. Maybe Kirk Cousins gets cut and then decide to go Kirk Cousins because of his connection to Stefanski. I don't know, but Browns are going to have, I guess, options, especially since they'll have a top 3 pick. So we'll see what happens. Joshua says, I'd rather have had Bowers instead of Fuaga. Saints are idiots. Bowers exciting as all hell, man. For sure. Joshua also says Saints are broke. T. Higgins is not coming. Yep. Tracy says Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. I mean, that is definitely the dream scenario, right? I think Saleh is an excellent, defensive play caller. I think he's the type of guy that he might not get another head coaching chance. So we'll see. We'll see. Also, just seeing this now, and I think Ed just dropped it in the chat. Gerard Mayo just got fired. Damn, didn't even wait till Black Monday. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Off a win, too. They just beat the Bills. I know Bills were resting their starters, so it's not exactly like a huge upset win. But you lose out on the number one pick by winning, and then you get fired. Like, to me, that's crazy. But that is a better job than New Orleans, because I think Drake May has shown a lot of promise. Obviously, their financial situation is much better, but that's another team that I think leapfrogs them. Although, and maybe I'm wrong, I feel like that's where Mike Vrabel might end up now. I feel like Mike Vrabel, he's a New England guy. He's vouched for the job. I would not be surprised if that's where he ends up going. So we'll see. But Gerard Mayo getting canned right now is kind of nuts that they didn't even wait to make the move. So there'll be more. There'll definitely be more. Wesley says, have you seen our opponents for next year? If we marginally improve, it could not be that bad next year. Only definite L's I see are Rams, Bills, and Niners. Yeah, I mean, look, the schedule is what it is. Things are going to change. Certain teams are going to make roster changes that are going to look different. There's always some type of quarterback movement in this league. Injuries happen. So I don't want to get too involved in it. I think for me, I'm not going to say, look beyond the results. I'm not Mickey Loomis over here. But I think it is pretty important with having a team that actually has an identity and is trending in the right direction. I don't need the Saints to be 10-7 next year. It's not happening. But at least show some sign of development, have an identity, get us fans excited about this team. Baby steps here. I'm not asking for the world. I'm not asking for the world. Daniel says this roster isn't good, so that stops a person from becoming a head coach. You sound so dumb, man. Did I say that stops him from becoming a head coach? I said, why the fuck would Ben Johnson want to come here if he has his pick? That's what I said. Now, if the Saints give him the best offer and he actually likes what they present from an ownership and front office, development, all right, then fine, let's ride, But I don't think this is the place that he's going to go to. The Saints can still get a quality head coach. And Ben Johnson might not even be a quality head coach. We don't know. But if he does have his pick, why would he pick the Saints when their roster isn't good and they're not in a good cap situation right now and they don't have a quarterback? Like, why would that be his spot if he has his pick like people are saying? To me, that's my question. That does not mean that they're not going to get a good head coach. I just don't know why he would go there if he has his pick. That's where I'm at with this. Daniel adds, the only thing that will stop head coach from coming here is the front office getting way too involved and wanting to keep the coaching staff. Not roster, clown. Appreciate the clown remark. I do agree with the front office part, but roster does matter too, man. You cannot tell me that the Saints are still appealing as opposed to other teams. They're not. They're not. And it's okay to admit that. It doesn't mean that what you said's wrong. What you said is right. If you are a coach and you don't like that Mickey Loomis is telling you, I'd like to keep this guy, I'd like to keep that guy. Yeah, that matters. Absolutely. But there's no doubt that this roster needs a shit ton of work. Walltown Best says, Chris, what would happen if Sean Payton made a Super Bowl with the Broncos? That'd be a slap in the face. Your thoughts? I guess the question is, what would you do, right? What can you do? He decided to get up and leave. It is what it is. And I would say that for him, it's going to be a tough task to get that team to the Super Bowl just because of how loaded the AFC is. Because obviously everything starts and runs through Kansas City. But let's say Kansas City has a down year, and I don't know when the fuck that would happen. But let's say they have a down year. Buffalo obviously has their quarterback. Ravens have their quarterback. Bengals aren't going to make the playoffs this year, but obviously we know they have their quarterback. In your own division, if we don't even talk about the Chiefs, the Harbaugh-Justin Herbert duo in Los Angeles is a really good duo. That's something that you have to get over to as a hump. So there's a lot of challenges. If he wins the Super Bowl, I think, again, cements Sean's status as one of the best coaches of the last 20, 30 years. I think that it would really, I guess you could say, slap in the face, sure, but Sean dipped when he saw kind of this thing heading in a downward direction. So what the hell can the Saints do? I mean, obviously Sean's great. I'm not one of those fans who's going to badmouth Sean Payton. Got to watch my favorite team win a Super Bowl because of Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton's a tremendous coach, and obviously what he's done with Denver this year is awesome. But what can he do? I mean, and what can the Saints do? He left. Wesley says, how do you feel about Pete Carroll as head coach? I don't know about this team, man. I don't know about this team. Like this, to me, is Pete going to fix it? What the fuck is he going to do with this team? I could be wrong. I would like to see Pete Carroll back in the NFL, though. I think Pete's a great personality for this league. I don't think he's like washed as a coach, but who knows? I think Pete, they said, is vouching for the Chicago job because he likes Caleb Williams. At least that's what Schefter said. I don't know if they'd be even interested in hiring him, but that's definitely someone they'll probably at least bring in for an interview for sure. Joshua says Chase Young has no help. What are you saying? Chase Young is that guy. He's old ass Cam Jordan trying to sack anyone. Is that guy is a little strong for me. I don't think he is that guy. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's that guy though, but to each their own. Red T says, won't happen. Loomis Carr is here for good. I wouldn't be so sure. I would not be so sure that they're keeping Carr. I could definitely see them moving on. This offseason. I think it's definitely possible for sure. Kyle says easily would take Vrabel or Glenn over Gruden. Don't hate Gruden, but he lost his touch as head coach. That's where I'm at. I don't think he's the guy that is going to fix this team magically. I mean, first off, the timeline doesn't make sense in my opinion. I mean, John Gruden is a guy that's in his 60s and he's magically going to fix this team when he, again, like I mentioned, he didn't have that much success the second go around with the Raiders. Daniel says, Boo Crew trash. I'll stick with Ross. You have no idea what you're saying, man. First off, Ross is great. I love Ross Jackson. He's a tremendous dude. Probably like the nicest guy I've ever spoken to in my life. So I do think Ross is great. And I would encourage people to listen to Ross Jackson. I have nothing for love for Ross Jackson. I've often said I do believe he is the best at this. And I don't want to say it's not close because there's a lot of really, really good Saints personalities, but Ross is my favorite. As for Buku trash and I'm not knowing what I'm saying, you don't like it, you can gladly leave. No one's telling you to stay here. If you get a kick on your Sunday because you have no life and it gets really excited to leave these type of comments, and that's fine. You can stay for as long as you like. I do think Ross is excellent, but as I mentioned before, it's Sunday, it's 4:30. You don't got anything better to do, man. That's kind of sad on your part. Ronnie says, look at Carr's numbers after not playing a lot of the games this season. Tell me he's the reason we're bad. The guy hasn't played in weeks and is still at like 14 in the league. I mean, Carr is what a lot of us have said, right? Like, he is an okay quarterback. He just doesn't elevate teams. And I think that's fine. Like, a lot of quarterbacks are like that. Blair says, Vrabel is the Pats head coach. It makes too much sense. Broad net is all I ask for. I think Vrabel is going there as well. There was a lot of insiders earlier this week, Patriots guys, who were all saying this is the job that he's eyeing, and really, really wants. So I think that for the Saints, it's probably a guy that I don't think you end up getting, but this is going to be a really interesting offseason. And I'm interested to see tomorrow for Black Monday, like who else is going to get canned? Doug Peterson is a goner for sure. Jags obviously have to make a move. Don't know what the Giants end up doing. I think the Giants might end up keeping Dable, which is kind of fucking crazy. Like you only won 3 games, but we'll see what they do. Raiders with Antonio Pierce, that's kind of been on the fence. So the Cowboys, I think, are keeping McCarthy. But we'll see what happens. But Vrabel to the Pats, I definitely think is what's going to happen. Ed says Marshawn would not let Mike get that record. That would have added some more intensity, man. Red T says it's not that Carr is bad. It's that he makes a few mistakes per game that loses you games. He's perfectly average, doesn't have that winning gene. I think that's definitely fair. He just doesn't elevate the team, like other quarterbacks could. But in his defense, and I say this about a lot of guys, there's only, to me, 5 quarterbacks that I think are like elite, and even the 5th one's borderline. Like, I like him more than most people. But obviously, your Mahomeses, your Allen, Burrow, Lamar, those are the 4 best in the league, right? And then I really like Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert's a really exciting quarterback. But even him, like, there's moments where he needs to play a little bit more consistent. But Justin's amazing. And if you don't have one of those 5, you're kind of stuck in that class. Now, there's guys below them. Stroud had a down year, so it's tough to say him. Dak's been kind of better version of Derek Carr. Stats are better, but hasn't won, anything of significance in the NFL. Stafford's a dog. I think Stafford's a great quarterback, but Not enough elite guys in this league. JB says Mayo cost New England the number 1 pick and just got fired for it. I think he was going to get fired regardless, but it definitely doesn't help that they just they just lost out on the number 1 pick. It does feel similar though to with Lovie Smith with the Texans 2 years ago when he won that game at the end. They end up losing out on the number 1 pick, and then he got fired right after. It does feel very, very similar. Brandon says, do you think the Bengals should move on from Zach Taylor? Personally, I wouldn't mind if they did. I've never been a Zach Taylor fan. I think he's a solid coach, but even like a year like this year, it's tough to say. The problem is defensively is what fucked them this year, and he isn't a defensive head coach, so I guess I have some leniency there, but I think they can do better than Zach Taylor, but the Bengals are not an organization that has historically spent a lot of money, so I don't know if they're going to go out there and just replace Zach Taylor and go big name hunting. I just don't expect them to do it. So I kind of think they're going to be stuck at where they're at, but we shall see. D23 says the one thing the Saints might have won this year is the Marshawn trade. He played only 2 games before getting injured again. So far he is. It's looking pretty good, that trade. But you got to hit on that draft pick, and that's what really matters. Half-Life says, appreciate the coverage the whole season. When is the next live stream going to be off-season wise? I'll keep you guys posted. I'd like to do something this week. If anything happens tomorrow, interview-wise, I will definitely do videos, and I'll probably do that regardless of when the Saints interview someone. Like, if there's an interview that's going to get reported, we'll have a couple of videos here, like just like your usual 5-minute videos, almost like, one of those signings that we do in free agency, or even our draft coverage when we do our smaller videos. So for interviews like that, I'll probably do that, but I'll let you guys know when we have a live stream coming up, but we'll definitely do something. Lance says cheap quarterback opens up cap space, backload T with large upfront guarantee. We've done it before. Olave 2 years from payday, maybe longer because of injury history. Look, I love T. Higgins. I don't think that's who they're going to get. Ronnie says, what quarterback is available that'll be better option than Carr, also that we can afford? That they can afford? No, I don't. I've said this before. In terms of like production-wise, your best bet is keeping Carr. I think the problem is if you're New Orleans, if the plan to be next year's to rebuild, I don't know what you're going to get out of Carr with the rebuilding roster. The timeline just doesn't make any sense to me, but I do agree. I don't think you're going to get anyone better. Money-wise, obviously you're not spending more, and production-wise, you're probably not getting better. But, if the goal is to rebuild, see what these young guys can do, and if it doesn't work, you draft top 3, then Carr's probably not the guy because he might win you a game or two that could end up costing you. But teams obviously aren't going to think like that, nor should they. I mean, they're not going into the season saying, hey, let's fucking tank, because that's not a thing. Red T says Carr gets us nowhere as a franchise. Donald says, can we still move up if Oakland and the Jets win? If Oakland wins, could be wrong here, but strength of schedule, theirs is much better than the Saints. So the Saints should move down to 8. And if the Jets win, as of now, I don't think that they end up benefiting from that, but we'll see. But I think they definitely move up to 8 if the Raiders win. So I guess that's the one to keep an eye on. I'll look into the strength of schedule stuff, and I'll tweet it out if it seems like a change is going to be made. But I think the Raiders one is the one to look at for sure. So we are getting into, I guess, kind of the last minutes here of our final post-game live stream of the season. I'll get into any other comments you guys have, and then I'm going to wrap it up. Brandon says, I would give Justin Fields a shot. Be exciting. I think for Fields, I don't think he'll end up being the guy. If he's not expensive, though, and the Saints end up cutting Carr, fuck it. Go for it, right? Who cares? I'm fine with it, but would have to see. Rosenfield 10 says, Jaden Daniels is the man. The top 5 QB list always includes Mahomes, Jackson, Burrow, Allen, and Herbert. There should be a top 6 list because Jaden is a dog. I mean, I think, and I'm not knocking Jaden. Jaden's fucking awesome. Such an awesome player to watch. I think that for Jaden, we just have to be careful when we're making these lists because CJ Stroud, everyone was ready to put on that list this year, and now O-line's been bad. They've lost Diggs to injury. They've lost Tank Dell to horrific injury. So you end up obviously taking a hit production-wise when you have good players around you and supporting cast takes a hit. But just to be careful of lumping them in with those really, really good guys immediately after 1 year. I think Jaden is going to be special. But it's just trying to be a little careful, obviously, of not crowning them so soon. But Jaden's so fucking fun to watch. I love watching Jaden Daniels. Half-Life says, Russell Wilson looks sus. Maybe they give him away and keep Fields. They have fallen from 10-3 to 10-7 quickly. Jordan says, what do you think we draft with that 8 or 9 pick? We're going to have to see. I think the beauty about the draft is we're obviously going to get a whole month of free agent signings, and we'll see what the Saints really need to shore up. I'd imagine they got to get better in the trenches, though. The defensive line needs work for sure. I think that's something that's got to get fixed. D23 says, thanks again for providing the platform all year, man. Great place to chat after games and always appreciate hearing your views. I really appreciate that, D23. I hope you guys, for those that have been doing this weekly, if you guys have gotten your comments in, I hope that I got to most of your comments this season. If not, I really deeply do apologize for that. We do have the offseason coming up. We'll continue our content. We'll have more videos. So this won't be the last that we talk Saints, that's for sure. It's going to be a very, very interesting offseason. But Saints have a lot to work on, obviously. Got to figure out what they're going to do at head coach. I think that's where it all starts. GM, I don't anticipate them making a move, although I would like to see them make a move. I don't think they're going to. Quarterback, obviously that's going to be a problem for them. I think they're going to have to make a decision here. Do you roll with Carr one more year? Do you cut bait and just go with the younger quarterback? We'll have to see. And they need help on the D-line. They need help at guard. They need help at just getting more pass catchers and just playmakers on offense. Might need another running back too. So Saints have a lot of needs. They got a lot of things that they're going to figure out. This is a roster that's not great. This is a coaching staff that's going to it's going to be different. So it's going to be fascinating to see how this all goes down. Regardless, though, we'll have you guys covered here at Boo Crew Media. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We greatly appreciate all the support you guys have given us this year. Until then, guys, that's going to wrap it up for our final post-game live stream of the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk soon.